of the Equity Advisory Group for the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. My name is Dr. Roberta Suzette Hunt, she, her pronouns, and I am the facilitator for this group. Closed captions are in English and Spanish. English closed captions are available within Zoom and YouTube. Users can follow this link to English and Spanish captions in a separate browser window. Go to ibr.news/captions. So we encourage EAG members to turn on your video. Please say your name when you begin to speak. And if you experience technical difficulties, please contact program staff at 360-329-6744. Next slide. EAG public input instructions. There will be an opportunity to provide brief public input later in the meeting today. To submit input after the meeting, email comments to info@interstatebridge.org with EAG Public Comment in the subject line. Call 888-503-6735 and state EAG Public Comment in your message. Next slide. Our agenda, we're starting with introductions, a program update. We're going to talk about section 106 and the draft SEIS presentation. We'll move to community benefits presentation and discussion, public comment at 7:15 roughly, and closing at 7:30. Okay. Introductions, names, your name, pronouns, and affiliation. So today we're not going to spend as much time on our introductions as we usually do. So today, just name, pronouns, and affiliation. Don't all jump.
I'll crack the seal.
I was waiting for a question.
I know it was. I thought, actually, I'm the reason we don't have a question, and it does feel a bit naked.
And I put a lot of thought into that too. So
okay.
But that means I'll have to come back. But Ray Mabey, assistant administrator for Interstate Bridge. I am standing in for Greg this evening. Hopefully that's not the reason we have have some people taking a pass on tonight's meeting. I'll try not to take personally, but I understand Greg's a much better presenter than I am, so I'll pass it off to somebody else.
Okay. Well, how about, just so that we, because we have fewer people than we were expecting, so how about people say their name, their affiliation, and how about one thing that you like about this time of year? But be quick about it.
Okay, I'll be quick.
Sorry, bears.
The color of the leaves. The trees in my neighborhood, when the leaves fall, they are so dense with the pigment in them that they stain the concrete, and you can see the shadow of the leaf weeks later. It's really amazing.
That's beautiful. All right, Tanya.
Tanya Adams, she, her pronouns with the IBR. And what I like about this time of the year, well, right now, I'm in Chicago. It is 82 degrees, which is, I know. Thank you. It's not like this. So right now, it's 82 and I can still wear sandals.
Okay. Aiden.
Good evening, everyone. Aiden Gronauer, they, them, or he, him pronouns, Assistant Director of Civil Rights and Equity for the IBR program. What do I like about this time of year? I like that Tanya can wear sandals, and I'm very jealous of that because it is rainy and cold here. But if I'm finding something positive, I like this time of year just for all the soups that I get to make. I really enjoy making soups and stews and warm foods this time of year.
Nice. Nice. All right. Nikki.
Hi,
Hi.
partner for the Office of Equity and Inclusion at the City of Vancouver. And what I love about this time of year is the change in colors. Being from California, it's refreshing to actually see fall.
Awesome. Awesome. How about, I don't know, names are falling out of my head and I am looking at DEI team and your name is out of
Sabrina.
Sabrina. Thank you. Sorry, Sabrina.
No worries. Sorry, it's a shared Zoom account for our team. There we go. I'm Sabrina Owens Wilson, I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Director at Metro. And I like it's apple cider season and particularly all the things you can add to apple cider. Mhm.
Awesome. Awesome. Haley.
There, my name is Haley Reff, she, her pronouns. I'm with the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. I am the Cultural Resources Program Manager. And I am going to take a little appetizer sampling of several things that have been mentioned here because, well, the temperature, I love the cooler temperature. So that's my favorite part of the year is the transition into the cooler, but before too much rain. And I agree, Aiden, the soups are the best part. Thank you.
Rebecca.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rebecca Steiner. I'm on the IBR environmental team, she, her pronouns. My favorite part of the fall is it's almost NWSL, which is the National Women's Soccer League playoff. So get to watch that.
Awesome. 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 Chandra.
Hi, my name is Chandra Washington. She, her pronouns from CTRAN. And my favorite thing about this season is that it is a little cooler and those crisp mornings are nice.
Nice. Nice. Miriam.
Hi, everybody. I am driving, keeping my camera off for a little bit. Miriam Halliday, Director for Workforce Southwest Washington. I love Halloween. It's my favorite holiday. I think it's hilarious to see people's costumes. And this year I get to dress my child up in a ridiculous costume. So it's only getting better. So that's my favorite thing about this season.
Yeah. June.
Hi, everyone. June Reyes, she, her pronouns. I'm from the Port of Portland. As a Community Impact Program Manager. And I just logged on, so I think I missed the check-in question, but I'm really glad to be here and dig into the impact assessment.
Happy to have you. Happy to have you. And the question is just something you like about this time of year.
I'll answer that really quickly. I like all of the fall foods, the spices, the things.
Wonderful. All right. Ryan.
Hello, Ryan LaPresse, he, him, IBR Transportation Planning Lead. I will agree with most of these things, and I like the colors of the changing of the fall colors.
Awesome. John Gardner.
Happy Monday, John Gardner, he, him, Tremet. And I'm guessing this is about fall.
Yeah.
And I too love the changing of the leaves.
Awesome. All right. And let's see. So, Shannon.
Hello, all. Shannon Singleton. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm leading the community benefits work for IBR. I'm a Philly girl, and so fall means football for me. So I'm all about the Eagles. There's an Eagles bar down the street. I get to spend a bunch of time with other Philly people rooting for my team. So that's what I'm currently enjoying. Thank you.
So good. So good. All right, Emily.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Thomas-Braza. I'm on the IBR equity team, also the community benefits team. And like my colleague Shannon, I am a football fan, especially college football. So this is my favorite time of year. My Huskers are struggling a little bit, but it's okay. We'll be back.
All right, Fabiola.
Hi everyone, Fabiola Casas on the IBR equity team. My pronouns are they and she, and something that comes to mind are traditions around Dia de los Muertos, which is normally November 1st into November 2nd, and just really enjoy just the spiritual and cultural aspects of that holiday. Thank you.
Yeah. Lucy, I think you are our last one.
Thank you, Lucy Hamer, IBR equity team, and use she, her pronouns. And for me, fall is all about that sweater weather. So I'm here. I'm ready to layer. It's when I'm at my prime. So
Awesome. Awesome. Okay, I think I got everybody. All right, so let's go to Ray for your update.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Hunt. I think as you went over the agenda, we've got a pretty packed agenda, lots of information, pretty dense, the 106, the DES, and community benefits. So this is a information-rich presentation, and that ties in with this screen, which is slide, which is a summary of our recent activities. Been really, really busy as we've come to the publication of the draft and the public comment period. You can see there that started October 18th and it ends next month. So we're about in the middle of that 60-day public comment period. And we've been busy reaching out. Last week, we had a couple of in-person public hearings, and one in Vancouver on Tuesday, and then in Portland on Thursday. Really good attendance. I think we had 130-ish in Vancouver. I think sub 100 in Portland, but I haven't heard the final numbers, so don't quote me to that. But lots of good questions from the attendees, very interested, and lots of different ways to provide comment we provided there, whether in writing or through court reporter we had to take a verbal comment, but with lots of information and staff to answer any questions. We've had a bi-state legislative committee to bring them up to speed on the things you're going to hear tonight as well, which is the findings of the draft supplemental environmental impact statement. So we went through that with them in great detail with the same experts that you're going to see here tonight, and received some good comments from them and input. We've got some virtual briefings coming up this next week. Let me get those dates for you really quick. I wrote them down and I didn't put them handy. There they are. They're going to be October 1st. So excuse me, we've been through that. I'll get back to you on those. But we got some public hearings coming up. One's a Saturday. But we've got virtual public briefings coming up. We had a joint meeting from the Oregon and Washington Transportation Commissions in our office. They were present, and they were there to talk about toll policy and rates. They discussed what scenarios they were going to take into a level 3 traffic and revenue analysis that helps them make a decision on the rate structure for the tolling of IBR, as well as consideration of different policies such as low-income discounts and tribal exemptions. It was a good meeting. They agreed on which rate scenarios to study and they continue to work positively towards those low-income discounts and travel exemptions. More to come, but I think that they'll get that level 3 work going and come back early next year to help finalize those results from that level 3 traffic and revenue study. We've been busy doing event tabling at different farmers markets, neighborhood associations, and Dia de los Muertos. So busy time. And if they go to the next slide, you'll see we've been even busier. I won't go through all these, but we've been given presentations about the program status as well as the public comment period for the draft supplemental that's out amongst all these organizations. And we continue to do that, and we'll get the word out until that public comment period closes on November 18th. Next slide, please. So that draft supplemental document, which if you look at it, it's a couple of volumes. It doesn't feel like it's a draft. It feels like it's a supplemental. It feels like it's an original document, not a supplement to something else that's been done. So there's been a lot of work, but it is a dense document, and it is accessible. We've got it so it adheres to ADA standards. We've got it online that has a search function. So if you've got an interest in one particular area, then you can easily find that through the search function. Now, there may be several parts of this document that address those, but one thing we suggested is start with the executive summary. That'll help you get an idea of maybe what you're focusing on, and you can use the search function to take you to those specific areas. That executive summary has been interpreted into multiple languages. However, as people get interested, we will provide translation services to the document upon request. There is a link there to the document online. And not only is a document, but there are many technical reports that dive into the analysis in more detail that are also accessible. We know that some people really just want something to touch and feel and like to do a page turn on a hard copy document. And so we've got hard copies available not only in our office in City Hall in Vancouver, at the library in Vancouver, as well as the Charles Jordan Community Center in Portland and the Portland building downtown. So people can go and view these. So they're there for viewing in place. But if people want to come to the project office, we can offer a flash drive that has it electronically as well. Like I mentioned, we've had some virtual public briefings earlier this month, kicking off that and extending that not extending, but discussing that public comment period. Next slide, please. So one thing we want to make sure that we've been getting out there is not only that we need people to comment whether you like it or whether you don't like it. We want to hear both, but we want to make sure that your comment is provided in a way that it makes the most impact to our work. And so how you comment and how the community comments is really important. So one is the portals. How do you make a comment period? One is there's a web-based form online. You can also send us an email comment. You can send it to our address if you want to write it down and send it through via the U.S. Post Office. We'll get that as well. Similar to the verbal comments with a court reporter that we had at the open house, we will accept verbal comments at that phone number, and we will transcribe those into writing and give that comment to the team for consideration. And then at the upcoming virtual public hearings, you can comment there as well. And the comments can also be provided to us in your native language. So you don't have to worry about translation services. Now, those upcoming virtual public events, as I mentioned, and here are the dates, so I'm saved, is coming up in about 5 days, October 26th at noon and October 30th at 6 p.m. We're trying to provide different times to make it accessible for people with various schedules. There's a list of all of our briefings and open houses and public hearings on our website, listed there below. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we want to hear your comments, whether you like it, whether you don't like it. Those comments help us understand how this impacts the community and how we could potentially adapt to address those comments. Now, that means that the team can dig into the options, some of the designs we have, start to refine them or adjust them, and then take those adjustments into the final supplemental. But when the comments are made, we really ask that they be specific to the information that you've read or learned that's in the draft supplemental document. So what in there are you commenting on? As you make that comment, it's really helpful us to understand what part of the information you read shaped your comment. So what informed you in a way to make you either like it or dislike it, or want something different? Now, for it to be included as part of our record, which is really important, how we do this matters, it's got to be submitted in one of those official ways I just went through. Comments submitted through social media, online, or informal conversations aren't counted as formal comments. We want to make sure that we make the most of the comments and that are made and the efforts being taken, because we know everybody has a lot going on, and we appreciate the time that's given to this program by commenting. So one of the things that we want to make sure that to help us understand your comment is we want to make sure that we don't include either hyperlinks to other information. We'd like you to consider providing an attachment or something and let us know what in that attachment is germane to your argument or suggestion or comment. You can imagine if somebody attached a 30-page document of a study and they said, that's why I feel this way or another. It's hard for us to understand where in that document is the piece that's really germane. So help us help you, and please be specific when mentioning attachments. And then lastly, if there are audio or video attachments, they need to be transcribed or submitted via the voicemail line. So if there is like I said, a video or audio, you can access through the video line, or excuse me, the voicemail line, and then they'll be transcribed. So it's another way to get those attachments in. But this is all built around making sure that the comments we received make the most impact and help the team the most to adjust or adapt the program's investments to your comments. This is probably one of the most important pieces of the comment process. Next slide, please. And with that, I will hand it over to, I don't know, Dr. Hunt, if you want to make the transition or pause for questions.
We will pause for questions.
Okay.
So, any questions from the group? If we could take the slides down for a moment so we can see that group. Any questions? No? All right. then we will move on. And Ray is here if a question comes up that is right for him. June has a question.
Sorry, I was like trying to find that button. I guess I'm just curious. This is a pretty impressive the engagement and getting the draft out there. And are there any gaps in terms of like places where you feel like it would be great to like know that you're going to hear from a particular sector? Or are there any gaps that you kind of see where additional outreach or support from this group could help to encourage them to join something or give comment?
So, June, I think your question is, are there gaps in our outreach or areas of the community that we want to make sure we cover? Is that right?
Yeah, kind of like when I was looking through the assessment and like, are there like, do you know that you're going to be hearing from environmental justice groups or things like that? Or do you feel pretty good about the comments you'll be getting? Or are there places where you feel like we need to make an extra push to help support from, particular perspectives?
Oh, well, I don't think I want to try and sway or get more of one perspective than another. That would make me maybe push the outcome one way or the other either. So I want to make sure that we provide as broad of opportunity as possible for people to comment in the way that they feel is important to them. We want to make sure we hear from everyone, like I said, whether it's a negative comment or positive comment or suggestion or idea. So really the piece that we are concerned about now is making sure that people are aware of the work we're doing, about the document and what's in it, and how to comment. And so if there are pockets we're aware of where you're hearing that people aren't aware and should be aware, you can help us by helping raising that to the team. And we can find ways to do presentations or do some outreach to that part of the community to make sure that they're getting the same information you all are getting tonight. So it's really about getting the word out.
Nikki. Oh, Nikki, you unmuted. There you go.
Sorry. Yes, actually, that's right in line with what I was going to ask as well. And so it's good to know that feedback on different options of how to get the information out. Sometimes people don't know what they don't know, as well as the comfortability with speaking up for themselves. Some certain communities may not always know they have that as an option. And so we want to reinforce them with that. So that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Nikki. Yeah, if you can help us be eyes and ears, and there's parts of the community, like I said, that maybe have an opportunity or are curious but don't know how, please let us know. We'll definitely reach out and present and engage and answer questions. Thank you.
Great. All right. Thank you. Thank you. So we're going to move
Sorry.
on. Oh, sorry, Sabrina.
I can't find the hand raise again. I just wanted to appreciate all the different ways you all are creating, the different ways that folks can engage with this. I think it's, it's not just on the website, but there's places you can go to get hard copies, the interpretation, the ability to submit in the language that you want to. I just really appreciate all the efforts to make it as accessible as possible.
Thank you, Sabrina. Really appreciate that. The thanks go to the team. Team's done fantastic work in preparing all that and getting it ready. So I'll pass that on.
Okay, for real. I'm gonna move on now. All right. Haley is going to present to us on section 106. So there's it's quite dense. This meeting is a bit of really giving information to you all. But please use the Q&A function to put some of your questions in and so that we can stack them. Remember that the Q&A is really for putting in your questions so that we can get answers for the collective, not to chat. It's not a chat feature. All right. Haley, take it away.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hunt. Good evening. I am looking forward to sharing with you a few details about our Section 106 process and public comment opportunity that went live on Friday, October 18th. So our last public engagement was in spring of 2023, where we consulted regarding initial phases of the Section 106 process, including the area of potential effects and baseline analyses. For this public comment period, we're excited to share our findings from two key steps in the Section 106 process, our identification of properties and assessment of effects to those properties. We will also be identifying new consulting parties for those affected property owners who own historic properties. So as you can see here, Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966 is a process that all federal agencies must follow to consider effects on historic properties from projects like IBR. Historic properties include any pre-contact or historic, district, site, building, structure, or object, such as artifacts, records, and remains. In the time since our last public outreach, we have conducted extensive efforts to identify historic properties, consult with parties to include federal, state, and local agencies, tribes, and other NGO parties. These efforts and consultations have culminated in the development of determinations of eligibility and findings of effect, which are now available for public comment. Slide, please. So to briefly describe the procedural steps of the Section 106 process, you can see here that it is divided into 4 key steps. I'll refer back to these throughout the rest of my discussion as well. In step 1, the lead agency or agencies, in this case, Federal Highway and Federal Transit Administration, initiate the process. So this includes determining the undertaking, coordinating with other reviews, identifying the relevant consulting parties, and planning to involve the public. Step 2 is the identification of historic properties. This includes determining the area of potential effect, or APE, preliminary survey work to identify historic properties, and determinations of eligibility, all in consultation with the Section 106 consulting parties and the public. In step 3, we then assess the potential effects of the program on the historic properties that were identified in step 2, again, in consultation with consulting parties and the public. And this is where we currently are in our Section 106 process. And then finally, in step 4, we resolve the adverse effects that were identified in the previous step by developing and considering alternatives or modifications to avoid, minimize, or mitigate the adverse effects. For the IBR program, these resolutions will be documented in a programmatic agreement, or PA. Slide, please. As described in Section 2 of the process, the area of potential effect, or APE, was determined in 2023 and is located in portions of both Washington and Oregon, reflecting program components and design options under consideration. It is within this area of potential effect that historic properties have been identified and program effects have been analyzed as laid out in steps 2 and 3 of the 106 process. Slide, please. Step 2 of the process has resulted in the previously described determination of eligibility and finding of effect documents. There is one determination of eligibility, or DOE, document for each above-ground historic resource identified within the APE, which describes whether it was found to be eligible for a listing in the National Register of Historic Places and why. So the required determining qualifier for whether resources would be considered within the Section 106 process. For the FOE documents, or finding of effect documents, there was one document for each historic property that was determined eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. Possible effects findings are an adverse effect, which is determined when a program activity may alter the characteristics of an historic property that make it significant. a no adverse effect, which is determined when a program activity will have an impact on an historic property, but will not alter the characteristics that make it significant. And of course, no effect is when there will be no effect to the property. For both the identification process and the effects analysis process, consultation with Section 106 consulting parties occurred prior to finalizing these determinations. So as a reminder, this includes federal, state, and local agencies, as well as tribes and other NGO parties. Additionally, all documents that are shared for public comment have been concurred with by the Oregon State Historic Preservation Office or the Washington Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation, respective to the state in which the property is located. So some of our next steps, the Cultural Resources online open house went live on Friday, October 18th, and our comment period closes at the same time as the NEPA comment period on November 18th. And there is a great online opportunity to step through all of these details, all of this information in a little bit more detail. So I invite you to take a look at the website and that online open house. Next up, then we will consider mitigation strategies for known adverse effects. And then as part of that step 4 of the 106 process, we will generate a draft of a project level programmatic agreement that will include roles and responsibilities of the agency and the consulting parties, agreed upon measures to resolve adverse effects, processes for the phased identification and evaluation of historic properties after the agreement is executed, and protocols for involving stakeholders in consultation as effects are identified and resolved. And finally, we'll consult with the public regarding that draft of the programmatic agreement, which will, as described, include mitigation measures for known effects. So how to participate in our Section 106 public comment period. Please do visit the Cultural Resources online open house. At the end of that website, there is a comment form to submit comments. And similar to the NEPA platform, you can also email comment or send a comment through the mail. Comments do not have to be in English, and of course the program will accommodate accessibility, ADA, and other needs. Finally, some resources for additional information if you would like to learn a little bit more about 106. Of course, our website with our existing open house, invite you to take a look at that, as well as the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. They have a really great introduction to Section 106 if you'd like to understand more about the process. And then one of our co-leads, Federal Highway, has a great Section 106 tutorial that takes you a little bit more in depth than that Advisory Council link for even more information. So really hope to see all of you traffic-wise on the website, and glad to answer any questions that you might have. Thanks so much.
Thank you. All right, questions for Haley? Okay, so there's nothing in the Q&A. All right, so I'm going to move on to the SEIS. So the environmental team, if you will begin.
Thank you, Dr. Hunt. I'll start it off with the transportation findings. I'm Ryan LaProuse, the transportation planning lead for the program. So I'm going to jump in here and cover some of the transportation findings, and then I'm going to pass it off to others on my team to cover the environmental findings. So starting off, the existing safety conditions, there were almost 1,800 crashes occurred during the 5-year period between 2015 and 2019 on I-5, the ramps and the ramp intersections in the IBR program area. During the 5-year period, there were 7 fatal crashes and 17 serious injury crashes. You can see the types of crashes there listed on the slide. The short merging, diverging, and weaving areas, as well as the limited shoulders, congestion, and bridge lifts all contribute to the high number of crashes we have in the IBR program area. On the bottom of each of these slides, there will also be a little bullet there summarizing where this information is listed in the draft supplemental environmental impact statement. Let's go to the next slide. Next, I'm going to cover the expected safety outcomes in 2045. 2045 is our future analysis year. So we did all of our impact analysis for the year 2045. So the no-build alternative, also I'll give a quick explanation. So the no-build alternative is not the IBR program. It's every other planned project in the Portland metro region that's planned as part of the kind of long-term plans. So that's what's included in the no-build alternative. And then we have two alternatives here kind of summarizing. The modified LPA, we have a summary of that kind of in the document, which includes a bunch of different features. And this is the modified LPA with one auxiliary lane. And then we have a modified LPA with two auxiliary lane design option that we usually give. It's kind of summarized in the document. So the no-build alternative will increase crashes by about 28% over current conditions. And then the modified LPA with one auxiliary lane or the modified LPA with two auxiliary lanes will reduce the crashes by about 13 to 17% compared to the no-build. And that's due to the geometric changes, including the interchange improvements, the auxiliary lanes, collector distributor roadways, lane widths, and full shoulders planned as part of the IBR program. Let's go to the next slide. Next, I'm going to talk about average daily person throughput on the I-5 Columbia River bridges. So this slide summarizes the people crossing the I-5 bridge by mode. So you've got kind of columns there. So vehicles is kind of your first column, and then you have freight, transit, and then active transportation are kind of your four main kind of columns there, kind of shown the graphics. So we summarize existing conditions, 2045 no build, and then the 2045 for the MLPA with one auxiliary lane or two auxiliary lanes, kind of for each of those individual modes. So daily person throughput is summarized there on the bottom. It kind of shows that there will be an increase in about 30% with the 2045 no build compared to the 2019 existing conditions. And then the modified LPA with one auxiliary lane or two auxiliary lanes will increase person throughput by almost 4% in 2045 compared to the no build condition. And this increase in daily person throughput with the modified LPA and options is due to the increase in transit. So you can see the large kind of change in the transit people throughput there, kind of highlighted in yellow, as well as the active transportation facilities. And then the program includes variable rate tolling, which also helps kind of people make choices between modes for the program. Go to the next slide. Next, I'm going to cover average weekday vehicle trips. So this one's just vehicles. So in the 2019 existing conditions, there were about 143,000 average weekday vehicle trips on the I-5 bridge. And in 2045, in the no build condition, this is forecast to increase 26%, about 180,000 vehicles on an average weekday. The modified LPA with the one auxiliary lane or two auxiliary lane will reduce that by about 3% to 175,000. This is due to the investment in high capacity transit throughout the program area, which includes the extension of the yellow line LRT from Expo to kind of Evergreen Boulevard, as well as bus on shoulder and new park and ride lots. It's also due to the variable rate tolls that are implemented on the new Columbia River bridges and the improved active transportation facilities. Let's go to the next slide. Next, I'm going to cover travel times. So we're going to start off with vehicles, and then I will get to transit travel times in a minute. So these travel times here are calculated as trips between the I-5 and I-205 interchange near Salmon Creek and the I-5 and I-405 interchange in North Portland. And these again are for 2045 time periods. So the peak period and the off-peak period travel times will decrease compared to the no build. This graphic is showing the kind of critical travel times. So you got southbound AM there on the left in the orange. That's kind of the AM with the sun kind of showing you there. And then the northbound PM showing the nighttime. So these are 2-hour peak period travel times. So let's start off with the southbound AM. So the no build travel time for that specific origin destination pair is forecast to be about 58 minutes. The modified LPA with one auxiliary lane will reduce by about 4 minutes to 54 minutes, or a 7% increase compared to the no build. And then the modified LPA with two auxiliary lanes will decrease down to about 50 minutes, by about a 8-minute improvement, or a 14% improvement. The reason there's not much more improvement is due to the southbound kind of congestion south of the program area. There's other bottlenecks kind of outside of our program area that are kind of dampening the travel time improvement in the southbound peak during the AM time period. There will be northbound improvements though, so let's talk about those. So the no build is forecast to be about 42 minutes in the no build for that same origin destination pair. It reduces almost 40% to about 26 minutes with the modified LPA, and then almost a 67% improvement compared to the no build, down to 14 minutes with the modified LPA and 2 auxiliary lane design option. Let's go to the next slide. Next, I'm going to cover hours of congestion. So hours of congestion are speeds below 45 miles an hour that are expected to occur at the I-5 interstate bridge. So today in 2019, for the existing conditions, we have 10 hours of congestion. There's about 3 hours in the AM and 7 hours in the kind of PM for northbound. So 3 hours southbound AM, 7 hours for the northbound in the PM time period. Here you can see the forecast for 2045. So the southbound congestion of the bridge and the no build is forecast to last 16 hours, starting at 5 a.m. and going all the way till 9 p.m. And then the northbound congestion of the bridge is forecast to be 14 hours for the no build, starting at 7 a.m. and going all the way till 9 p.m. as well. In the southbound direction, the bottleneck of the Columbia River bridges would improve under the modified LPA and design options compared to the no build, improving southbound flow with the Columbia River bridges, and the congestion would be reduced from the 16 hours down to about 4.5 to 4.75 hours at the bridge, opening up the midday and off-peak travel time periods for users and freight. In the northbound direction, you can see the reduction as well from 14 hours to 9 hours with the modified LPA with 1 auxiliary lane, and then a little more reduction down to about 6 hours with the modified LPA with 2 auxiliary lanes. The big difference is kind of the extent of that congestion. How far does it back up? So the northbound 1 auxiliary lane will still back up down to about the I-5, I-405 split, where the modified LPA with 2 auxiliary lanes will only back up to about Marine Drive. And all this information is covered in the document as with some more information and graphics for you. Let's go on to the next slide. Next, I'm going to talk about transit travel times. So transit travel times are shown here for a different pair. So the travel time pair to understand here is from kind of the downtown Vancouver near Evergreen Boulevard to downtown Portland at the Pioneer Courthouse Square. So we studied each travel transit mode kind of covered here. So you got express bus. Again, the critical peak period is southbound AM for the peak commuter going southbound from Vancouver into Portland. So that's the graphic shown on the left. And then the middle graphic there is showing the northbound PM express bus. And then we have light rail travel time on the right-hand side. So I'll start with light rail. So the modified LPA light rail travel time is 47 minutes. I do want to point out that each of these travel time pairs includes a 10-minute combined walk access. So when you are getting to transit, you might show up right on time, you might show up a few minutes early. So each of these travel time pairs includes waiting time and that kind of walk time, about a quarter mile from your trip to the transit piece. So the reason there's not a no build shown is no build light rail doesn't exist. So that's why there's only the modified LPA with 1 auxiliary lane or 2 lane, and that neither of those travel time is the same for both of those alternatives in about 47 minutes. So let's talk about the express bus. The southbound AM express bus for the no build is 48 minutes, and you can see that it increases with the modified LPA to 59 minutes. The reason for this is the downstream congestion I described on the last slide, where there is bottlenecks outside of our program area that are kind of impacting the flow. So while we improve the flow at the bridge, that kind of opens up and allows a few more vehicles to get down to the next bottleneck. So that's why the express bus travel time with the modified LPA 1 or 2 is slightly worse than the no build in the southbound AM. But in the northbound PM, you can see the express bus with the modified LPA as a reduced from 67 minutes to 45 minutes with the 1 auxiliary lane and down to 33 minutes with the 2 auxiliary lane. So the round trip express bus travel time southbound AM and then northbound PM, if you add those up, would be a 10 to 20% faster with the modified LPA and the design option compared to the no build alternative. Let's go to the next slide. And this slide is talking about transit ridership and then passenger miles. So let's start with the transit ridership, which is the graphic on the left. So daily transit ridership will increase almost 100% with the modified LPA and design option compared to the no build. You can see the forecast for 2045 there, and the data is about 15,000 for the no build transit riders across the interstate bridge under the no build alternative. And then with the modified LPA, it'd be up to almost 29,000 transit riders using that trip. And the big reason for the improvement and shift to transit is again that extension from the light rail from the Expo Center to Evergreen Boulevard, new park and ride lots, and the improvements to the speed and frequency on the express bus service crossing the river, as well as the variable rate tolling at the bridge. The graphic on the right talks about passenger miles in transit VMT. So it's vehicle miles traveled in transit and exclusive right of way. So the no build is forecast to about 69,000. And then we get about a 200% increase to almost over 200,000 passenger miles in exclusive right of way. And that's due to the extension again of that light rail. That's an exclusive right of way, as well as the express bus on shoulder. That's also exclusive just to transit mode. So a lot of dense information there for you, but this is just a sampling of some of the transit findings in the transportation EIS. And I will stop here, Dr. Hunt, and see if there's questions. And then I think I will transition to others to talk about other environmental subjects.
All right. So nothing in the Q&A. Any hands to raise? All right, so no. Sabrina.
Yeah, thank you for walking through that. I'm wondering if you could expand a little bit on some of the congestion issues that are impacting the southbound times.
Yeah,
like
I can
where
do
are
that.
those, and
Yep.
are there investments planned for those areas too?
I can talk about those. So today there are 3 bottlenecks southbound, kind of one in the program area at the interstate bridge. We've got 1 south or 2 south of the program area, 1 at the I-5, I-405 split, kind of where you come up in North Portland. And there's 1 in the Rose Quarter. Those are existing conditions. The Rose Quarter program is planning to improve the Rose Quarter kind of bottleneck. And that's been, in its own separate projects that is in the no build and in the build conditions. So that main bottleneck that still exists south of the program area is kind of the I-5, I-405 split there in North Portland. ODOT is been, aware of it, has been looking at kind of other potential solutions to kind of help with that, and kind of looking at a separate, study for that information. But those are planned, those aren't planned right now, so they're not included in the kind of the future conditions. That's why we have that kind of downstream congestion that still exists and is impacting kind of the southbound AM flows. You do have an improvement in the midday and the PM, and this graphics are just kind of getting to the peak commute time periods, but we do have more information in the technical documents and in the EIS that cover that kind of off-peak and midday period, which is important to other users, as well as freight, kind of summarized in there. So, and then the northbound, the only bottleneck kind of in the program area is at the bridge, and then we're really kind of trying to address that with the program, and we're seeing pretty good improvement between the MLPA and then the MLPA with the 2 auxiliary compared to the no build condition.
All right. All right, let's move on. And again, remember the Q&A is available.
Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Rebecca Steiner, and I'll be discussing some of the long-term community findings of the draft supplemental environmental impact statement. The draft SCIS also looks at temporary construction impacts to each resource, which can be found in Chapter 3. And so each of the slides that I'll cover has the exact section number where those resources are located in the draft SCIS. So for environmental justice, there's a presidential executive order that requires federal agencies to look at impacts to environmental justice communities, or EJ for short. EJ communities include low-income populations and minority populations. And based on the program's EJ analysis, EJ populations would experience benefits similar to those for the general population, such as increased access to high-capacity transit, active transportation, and reductions in vehicle travel times, increased access to jobs due to those faster travel times, and improved air quality. However, like the general population, EJ populations would experience impacts such as increased traffic and noise from construction. And EJ populations may experience a disproportionately high and adverse impact compared to the overall population. These potential impacts include the costs of tolling, displacements in EJ areas, and potential impacts to cultural resources that are important to those EJ communities. Next slide. So earlier, Haley Ref described the Section 106 process, and while the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, and Section 106 are separate regulatory processes, federal guidance encourages coordination of these reviews such that technical analyses prepared for one can then inform the other where appropriate. So the IBR program is coordinating these evaluations with FHWA and FTA, and both reviews are being taken into consideration as design progresses on the proposed program investments. And so based on the analysis, 12 of the 15 previously recorded archaeological sites in the APE have the potential to be impacted by construction-related physical ground disturbance. And for above ground cultural resources, the modified LPA would result in adverse effects to 12 historic built environment resources. And these resources could include historic buildings, bridges, and other types of architectural structures. Next slide. So those are my 2 slides. I guess I'll stop here for any questions on EJ or cultural resources.
All right, nothing in the Q&A. Any questions or comments? So we will keep, June.
Hi, I was wondering, are there specific neighborhoods that you anticipate being impacted in the short term due to, the traffic impact or congestion during construction?
That information is in the draft SCIS, and I see Angela's come on screen, so if maybe she can provide a better answer.
Thanks, Rebecca. The construction is going to happen throughout the corridor at different times. And so it's the neighborhoods that would be proximate to construction on the Oregon side, the Bridgeton and the Hayden Island neighborhoods. When there is construction on Marine Drive, that could affect the Bridgeton neighborhood more than others. Certainly the folks living on Hayden Island are, right at the southern end of the replacement bridges over the main stem of the Columbia River. And as that construction is going on, they will definitely have some noise and potentially dust detours. And similarly, as you move further north, along with the bridge construction affecting Hayden Island on the south, on the north side, the Esther Short neighborhood and those around SR 14 and downtown Vancouver would have experiences with noise and dust and detours, sometimes on the local streets as well as the main line. Neighborhoods further up, Arnada, Shumway, wouldn't be affected until those areas were under construction. So it's really associated with the phasing. But there are definitely neighborhoods abutting the I-5 corridor that we are really trying to identify those impacts for.
Great, thank you. And I guess a follow-up question, do you anticipate that then folks might take the 205 instead and there be impacts there? And I guess just a quick question about the EJ section. I think you all call out the Esther Short Park neighborhood and the Rockwood neighborhood as EJ populations, but the Rockwood neighborhood is a little bit farther away. So is that kind of just looking at the larger study area and then identifying the EJ populations within it? Is that part of the, the statement?
Yeah, the Rockwood neighborhood is out in the Gresham area where that's the neighborhood that the current Ruby Junction operation maintenance facility is for TriMet and their light rail, where they maintain their light rail vehicles. And this project includes some expansion at that site to support the additional light rail vehicles that would need to be maintained at that site. And so that's why we address those impacts associated with Rockwood. Your other question about impacts, changes in traffic patterns associated with folks that might change their route to use I-205. I'm going to push that one over to Ryan, who looked at that in the transportation analysis.
Yeah, I'll jump back in. So the diversion analysis is included in the document, kind of showing how many people will go back over. As we mentioned, you've kind of got the improvements to the program area on I-5. You've also got the improvements to transit and the extension. So while some people will transfer and kind of divert, the forecasts kind of show that the reduction is minimal. It's kind of summarized in the document. Again, the major improvements and majority of the trips want to be on the I-5 corridor, and that's kind of summarized in the document. So during the off-peak periods, people may divert over there to avoid paying the toll on the I-5 bridge when congestion is less, but during the peak periods, congestion is similar and getting worse on I-205. So the improvements in the I-5 will keep them in the I-5 corridor. It's kind of what the analysis is showing.
Thank you all so much. You are very knowledgeable and appreciate y'all chiming in there and helping out.
All right. I think we are good to move on. All right,
Hi,
Emma.
thank you. My name is Emma Johnson, and along with Rebecca and Angela, I'm part of the IBR environmental team. So I'll discuss some of the environmental findings in the draft SEIS for climate change and ecosystems. Next slide, please. The draft SEIS evaluates climate change, which we know is a top priority for our community. And the SEIS, it provides quantities of greenhouse gas emissions under the modified LPA, as well as the no-build alternative. And the modified LPA would have lower greenhouse gas emissions than the no-build, primarily due to a lot of the transportation findings that Ryan just spoke to, such as a mode shift to transit and active transportation. The draft SEIS also provides some information about some of the design details and how those could affect resilience to anticipated changes in our climate over the long term. Next slide, please. So ecosystems is referring to organisms as well as the habitat that supports them. And there are a lot of both aquatic and terrestrial species in the program area, including several threatened and endangered species, in particular some aquatic species in the river. And the draft SEIS looks at species and habitat in general, but it also looks at a list of what's called species of interest. And that refers to a list of native species that have been identified through tribal and agency coordination as locally important. And it's inclusive of threatened and endangered species, but goes beyond that. There are several federal, state, and local regulations in place that the program is going to have to comply with. That's for construction as well as operation. And so moving forward, the program will be looking at ways to minimize impacts to ecosystems. And then it will also need to provide mitigation and habitat restoration as part of the program's effort to minimize the net overall impact of the program on the environment. that is the end of my portion. Are there any questions on those? Be happy to take them.
No, I don't think so. I think we're good.
I think Sabrina.
Sabrina.
Hi, it's me again. I wanted to see if you could maybe help contextualize the greenhouse gas emission reduction. Like, how do we understand the scale of that impact?
That's a great question. I will try my best to answer it. And Ryan, I might need a little bit of help from you. We do use the information from vehicle emissions. We look at greenhouse gas emissions both from operations as well as from construction. We looked at kind of what they call the tailpipe emissions and the vehicle miles traveled to do air quality analysis as well as greenhouse gas emissions. They're one of the things that comes into play is over time, the vehicle, what we call the fleet, so the overall population of vehicles. If you look we're now evaluating impacts in the year 2045, not today, but 20 years into the future. And if you compare, just to give you some perspective, if you look at what are people driving or what you see on the roads today compared to 20 years ago, we see a change in the vehicle fleet, right? We see a lot more electric vehicles and so forth. And so just the improvements in the overall fleet is a huge benefit to the greenhouse gas emissions. And that's why you don't see a huge difference between the no build and the modified LPAs, because a lot of it is just foundational to the vehicles that are on the road at that time. During construction, we're looking at materials and equipment operations. And so obviously in the no build where you're not constructing, we don't have those construction emissions. But in the build situation that with the modified LPA, there is an expenditure of greenhouse gas emissions, expenditure of energy during that construction period. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. That's helpful.
Great. I definitely recommend, if you're interested in that topic, there is a lot more detail in the draft SEIS, as well as the climate technical report and the I think it's the energy and greenhouse gas technical report that really gets into the details if you're interested in how they calculated that information.
All right.
Yeah, and Dr. Hunt, I think just for folks, I mean, we did only highlight about 4 or 5 sections in the draft SEIS. We have 23 different sections, topics that we analyze impacts for. So this was just kind of the tip of the spear here. And so really encourage folks, whatever you're interested in, definitely check out chapter 3 in the draft SEIS for the topics that are of most interest to you to look into and review and make comments to the team on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's move. Okay, community benefits.
Thank you. And I'll start us off here and then hand it over to Emily so we can go ahead to the next slide. So we just wanted to share a little bit of an overview of the process for community benefits. The advisory group recently completed its brainstorm phase. And so as they move into their review and refine, which started last month, that's what we'll be bringing to you all, as well as the equity, as well as the community advisory group. So you can see here that it's really about this iterative process between the community benefits advisory groups, conversations, of course, with IBR leadership, coming to CAG and EAG, and then your input that we'll collect tonight will come back to the Community Benefits Advisory Group before they move to make recommendations, so they can be really hearing from the discussion that you all have, as well as the discussion that the Community Advisory Group had. Once that part is complete and the CBAG moves through their modified consensus decision-making, those proposed benefits will go on to the Executive Steering Group, which will then be forwarded to IBR leadership and our DOT leadership in Washington and Oregon before moving to final approval. So we just wanted to share a bit of the process because we're about midway through. And what you'll hear tonight is the first review of fine session that the CBAG conducted, and Emily will share that discussion and the proposed benefits with you. So I'll hand it over to you, Emily.
Thank you, Shannon. Next slide, please. All right, so this category is in the avoid further harm category, and that is rooted in the equity framework and the equity objectives that you all helped to define, that the EAG helped to define. And so this avoid further harm is to actively seek out options with a harm reduction priority, rather than simply mitigating disproportionate impacts on historically impacted and underserved communities and populations. Next slide, please. And so the potential benefits that were discussed in the review of fine session with CBAG last month were the following in this category: to have collaborative conversations with landowners and consulting tribes to maintain access to the river for Native communities throughout construction. And part of this, the discussion around this one was really working with those communities directly to understand what access means to them, and rather than that being defined for them. The next would be require contractors to perform foundation inspections or videos on specific properties as defined by each specific work activity prior to construction to establish baseline conditions for determining whether any subsequent impacts are caused by IBR construction. Increase public transit services and explore alternative routes to mitigate transportation impacts to transit riders, walkers, bikers, rollers, and people using mobility scooters during construction, including the implementation of shuttle buses and additional bus routes along the impacted routes in the cities of Vancouver and Portland. Right. Develop a proactive communication plan for before and during construction to keep the public informed of potential impacts such as noise, route closures, and other mobility impacts. This is to include communication for transit or mobility impacts as soon as possible, as well as messaging to homeless service providers. So that proactive outreach is really key here. Next is to establish a comprehensive process for community members to voice concerns and report negative impacts, potentially including an online platform and/or a hotline where community members can report issues and receive timely responses, ensuring a commitment to responsiveness and due diligence to reach resolution. And there's a consideration here for exploring the use of AI. Next slide, please. So continuing on, the real estate process, including eminent domain, which is a last resort, and outreach must include considerations for language access and culturally specific and relevant services. Identify funds for direct impact mitigations resulting from construction. Develop comprehensive strategies and funding options with the program and other partners that can be implemented to address the relocation and housing needs of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness affected by the program, with another consideration to explore partnerships and funding options with agencies providing culturally specific services focused on equity priority communities and those who conduct street outreach and engagement for housing placement. Next slide, please. Minimize impacts on small businesses during construction, particularly those on Hayden Island, to avoid extended closures. explore opportunities for replacing removed trees early in the process in consideration of timing for planting and maturation. In line with existing procurement policies, ensure that there are opportunities for representation of equity priority communities in the RFP review process to avoid and address potential biases. Next slide, please. And so before we go to discussion, I just wanted to share a little bit more context for the conversations that we have during these sessions with the Community Benefits Advisory Group, which is that a number of the recommendations that we just went through are related to standard practices that either the Departments of Transportation or, standard elements of contract specifications. A lot of these are really in line with those common practices. And so we just wanted to name that some of this does exist. And, we want to hear maybe where folks want to see more and some of that additional fodder there. And so with that, our discussion prompt is, are these recommendations in line with the EAG Equity Framework principles from your perspective? And I'll turn it to you, Dr. Hunt, to help us through our discussion.
All right. All right, so thoughts or reflections on these community benefit steps? Nikki.
Dr. Hunt, I want to let you know, so I kind of did my homework this go around, and I have quite a few, but I don't want to take up time. Is that something that maybe I could share? And is that okay? But I have a few bullet points throughout this portion that I wanted to just ask questions about. Can you hear me? Yeah, go for it. Okay. I just want to be respectful.
Go for it.
Emily, please make sure you don't take this directly, okay? It's just, I was doing my homework, okay? When specifically around the identify funds for direct impact mitigations resulting from construction, do you think we could be a little more explicit about that just to ensure that those benefits are actually getting to who they should be getting to and that it's equitably distributed, just being a little more detailed, if that's possible? And another note that is worth mentioning now is when where it says collaborative conversations with landowners and consulting tribes, just in full transparent, or conversations don't always mean an outcome. Is it possible to just say collaborative with the landowners because it's easy to say, yeah, I talked to them, but versus I actually collaborated with them and got something done. Does that make sense? What I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And we'll bring it all back to the CBAG. So this will all fold into their discussion. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And then what else did I have? One more was the rest of them are kind of like chunks of information that I will gladly send in an email to whoever feels is most appropriate to send an email to. But those two I'll address for now. Thank you.
Thank you. And we can work with Lucy and Fabiola to make sure you have the right email address after the meeting, Nikki. Thank you.
Fabiola, there's a question in the Q&A. Do you want to share it with us?
Yes. The question is, will there be a language access component as part of the proactive communication plan?
I think this is where it gets tricky. There could be, but that's something we'll bring back to the CBAG because we really want them to own these recommendations. And so we will bring that question back and see if there's additional language that they want to add. I think there was reference to culturally specific and relevant, but being explicit about language access makes a ton of sense.
Nikki and then Sabrina.
I just want to let you all know I am allowed to officially state we just completed our language access plan for the city of Vancouver, and we are presenting that to all MOT leaders literally tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Y'all pray for me. So once we have presented it to our own city leaders, we would be happy to share our plan that will be going into effect as of 2025 that you can use as well.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Good luck tomorrow. So Sabrina.
Thank you for walking through all of this. And I keep saying, like, this is the part I've been waiting for and I'm excited about. So thank you for all of your work just to collect all these ideas and to very clearly carry through the equity framework that we to really see that front and center in this conversation. I think echoing some of Nikki's points just about kind of where it is in that space of conversations and engage. What's the impact I think we want to see from that? I think another example is like the proactive communication plan about what's happening with construction. Like, what are we hoping the impact of that? Because I think that's what when we start to get to kind of measurable benefit. And then the other thing I was gonna say, I think this is a space where it seems like there's an opportunity to speak more directly to that displacement and supports around, I guess it's sort of in there with the minimizing impacts on small businesses, and mitigations around construction. But I think we had a lot of conversations about displacement in the framework under this category of avoiding harm. And then I do think that this calls out, especially around how we address unsheltered and homelessness, calls out opportunities for collaboration among the partners at the table. And so I'm glad to see that one in there.
Thank you. We'll definitely take that note about impact back on all of these and make sure that we're having that conversation at the CBAG.
And one thing, if I can mention really quick on that piece is some additional context we had shared with the group is that in the draft SEIS, which we're excited we can talk about it and name now, but that there is a level of mitigation there for impacted businesses. And so what we're really digging in a little bit more with CBAG, and if you all have input that you'd want to share with us on this, is what specifically would be some of that support look like, right, for impacted businesses? So that if there are road closures or things like that that may impact, that the access to them, but what are some other things that maybe you would think of when you think about supporting businesses that may be affected?
Miriam.
Hi, thank you. Like Sabrina, I'm excited about this part of the project. So I looked over these and appreciate all the work done on them. I agree with some of the sentiments that have been stated around specificity and needing, I think, more. It seems like there's a lot of planning and communication stipulated in these, but not necessarily any direct impact, to Sabrina's point. So I'd love to see, I guess, for each one of them, and perhaps this is something the CBAG is working on, but like to what end for each of them? So how do we see a success? Like what are we measuring for each of them to show a return or an impact? I would be curious about that. And I guess increased specificity on each would be interesting to me of like actual action. So that would be what I would, I guess, ask for. I don't know in terms of process, does this come back to us? I know it was mentioned a little bit about process in the front end of the presentation, but what are the sort of checkpoints, I guess, after this for the
Yes, so it won't come back to you for additional input. It will come back to you as these are the recommendations that the CBAG made, so you can see the final product of their work, but by category. So it won't be like months before you see it. You'll see this chunk of work once they actually do that decision-making process, which we expect to move them through in December.
Okay. Okay.
An EAG member who couldn't make it tonight emailed, they would add to communication plan more signs visible along the corridor, noting project information for all individuals in transit by car, bus, or bike pedestrian.
Thank you, Emily. Emily and I were smiling a bit because the CBAG loves signs, and signs have actually come up in every single category. So they're in many, many places, and we will be sure to add that into that conversation. And I should have noted at the front end that Vicky from EAG also sits on the Community Benefits Advisory Group. So we are trying to make that explicit link in somebody actually doing the work. So hopefully next time we come, Vicky can also share some of her perspective.
Great. Fabiola, you have a question for us?
We've got another one here. Are the community benefits also related to the potential tolling fees that would be collected?
They are not directly related to tolling. The Community Benefits Advisory Group has primarily focused on things that the program controls. It doesn't mean that they won't give some general input around tolling, but because that's not an IBR program decision, we have not spent too much time with the CBAG on that specific issue.
Sabrina.
Just one more thought on the process for the comprehensive process for community members to voice concerns and report negative impacts. I'm curious if or for the CBAG to, like, if they have recommendations on the structures needed to like respond to that. It just reminds me of some of the conversations we've had in the construction industry about setting up the reporting structures for, like, I mean, this is different, maybe, I don't know, for harassment or compliance issues, and just the kind of care and like having an what's the word? Ombudsman system or something. But if the committee has any recommendations on structures that would be effective, that might be a good thing to think about as well.
Absolutely. There's some of the work around potential structures of that is a conversation that's happening. But I want to be really clear that we're also keeping separate what the required processes are around workplace harassment, and separate from any processes that would have to do with any future labor agreements. So really being clear with the community benefits group about which lane we're in. So absolutely, yes. And I just want to make sure you all know that we're really working to keep those lines defined, because we know there's some specific reporting and investigation structures.
Yes, absolutely. I was just thinking, like, at a very high level, reporting structures, but
Yes.
Understand the distinction, absolutely.
Other questions or? Nikki? I mean, we have the time, so I want to use the time. You know, it's
how they say back in the day, you ain't said nothing but a word. Okay. Give me 1 second. I went ahead and closed all my notes and I was like, so give me 1 second, I'll come right back. Okay. So another note that I had was, that's probably not how I want to phrase that. So in regards to mitigation, what is the program already required to do or committed to doing as part of the project or as mitigation with respect to the following? I think we kind of went over this a little bit, but an example of the neighborhoods and populations technical report lists similar sounding measures in the program, such as hold community meetings before constructions to inform residents of the construction timeline, relevant staging plans, conduct regional outreach activities to provide information on construction related impacts and detours. So I know there was a mention specifically for small businesses, but what are we going to do overall other than signs?
Absolutely. I think there's been, and I would look to the other folks who are here from that shared about the draft and all the environmental documents, if there's anything particular in there to uplift. But I would say, Nikki, in the community benefits discussions, we've been getting into some of those details. So for example, the reason people experiencing homelessness or folks with low income are raised is because of the fact that somebody had mentioned people traverse the state lines to do bottle and can returns. And so what does that look like if you're not able to get across the bridge in the same way? And so there was literally like, you should put up flyers at places where people frequent who might have low incomes or who might bottle and can in order to supplement income. And so those are the sorts of things that have come up with some of the details at the community benefits conversation. But I also hear you asking something bigger that I'm not sure if the other folks who are technical experts here have anything to add there.
Yeah, Nikki, I'm not quite sure I captured your question about notification to the public about projects and their potential impacts. I think that's what it was. Was it about the advisory group recommendations or about the project efforts itself?
The project efforts itself, more like where you have the conversation around you're going to develop a proactive communication plan before and during construction to keep the public informed. I cut and pasted so that way I didn't have to go back through the thing of potential impacts such as noise, route closures, other mobility impacts. But so I guess my question was, what is the program already required to do or committed to doing as part of the project as mitigation? Like any more recommendations, but it's okay if you just don't have them yet.
Yeah. We're about a year away from the first potential construction work.
So then we have time.
We got some time, but both DOTs and the trans agencies have procedures on that communication. But as a program rolls these potential plans out, we'll be working those with our partners in both the trans agencies as well as the City of Portland, City of Vancouver to get their feedback and input on those plans. So it needs into the community. So we'll be trying to collaborate on the best practices.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Yeah. And Ray, I could add on to that a little bit. Nikki, we have in our mitigation sections in each of the chapter 3 subsections, we do have proposed mitigation measures, both for long-term impacts as well as for shorter-term construction impacts. And if you look in the neighborhoods and equity section or the economic and land use section, both of those are going to have mitigation measures for construction activities that affect neighborhoods, businesses, and some proactive communication. It's written a little generally at this point, but we will refine those to be much more specific commitments in the final supplemental EIS. But that'll give you a flavor about, letting folks know when their areas, when construction is coming to their areas, and making sure that there's signage for changes in access to businesses so that those businesses can remain open. And I mean, you've been around construction before, you've seen that, but those, I think, Ray, are some of the requirements you were mentioning that are kind of standard best management practices for the DOTs and for TriMet. But then there's other things that we can consider, particularly with noise impacts, and there will be noise monitoring during construction, where we have sensitive receptors, whether that's hotels, residences, parks. I don't think we have any schools close enough that we would be measuring noise impacts at schools, but some of those areas that have lower thresholds for noise impacts. But there's definitely some of those mitigation measures in the EIS section. So,
Angela, that's exactly what I was looking for. Thank you.
You
Thank
bet.
you, thank you, thank you.
Fabiola, do you have a question in the Q&A?
Yes, thank you. And thank you folks for using the Q&A feature. This one is a two-part question. So and both parts are not completely related. So I'll read both of them. Let me know if you want me to repeat the second one. The first part here, has art been part of the conversation as a component of signage and or mitigation as a benefit to community in the area? And the second part, also wondering if areas without trees will lose shade and if that needs to be mitigated for extreme heat, for example.
So art has been a part of the conversation, at least at the brainstorm phase, but it is in the community benefit category. It has not been discussed in the avoid further harm. So that's why you don't see it here. You will see it with some more specificity in the, I think that's going to end up being the fourth tranche of recommendations. So absolutely. And I know there's been a bunch of discussions around it in the brainstorm phase. And then the second question, Fabiola, sorry, I lost that one.
Oh, that's okay. So the second part of the question, wondering if areas without trees will lose shade and if that needs to be mitigated for extreme heat, for example.
It's a good question, actually. And I think we talked a lot about trees and the desire for the most mature trees possible to be planted as a replanting. So I think we can add this, Emily, to that piece, that particular potential benefit to bring back to the CBAG for places that it's not, what else might need to be added if it's not just about the trees.
Yeah, Shannon, I would just add on to that, and I know the question was about areas without trees, but certainly areas with vegetation, whether it's shrubs, trees, or what have you, that's part of our standard mitigation to replace that in kind as much as we can, although it's very challenging if you have to remove mature vegetation, it's hard to establish mature vegetation. So I think there's that synergy there with the work Shannon and the CBAG team are doing.
Yes, I know more about growing things in nurseries than I probably would have ever known had I not worked on this project. So we went down some fun rabbit holes, and it sounds like TriMet has some history doing some cool things to try and get more mature vegetation. So we're going to explore those in the next couple of weeks.
I'll also just add a little bit. Shannon, I don't know if you mentioned it, but on the question about art, usually with grants from FTA for transit improvements, there is a requirement for a certain percentage of that grant to go toward art, which you usually see at the transit stations. sometimes on structures supporting the transit facility, but that's another element.
Awesome. Thank you.
Nikki.
Okay, it's my last one. It's a loaded one though. I don't think I've heard it mentioned tonight. If it was, please correct me and I apologize. I was distracted with baby a couple times, so I missed a few things. I know at a previous meeting, someone has already done the work to share and harm that has been caused, but how are we going to acknowledge that harm from before during this work? Like, how are we going to share that with community? Almost taking accountability before we start, if that's making any sense, of saying we know we've caused harm before doing a projects like this, and we've absolutely done anything and everything possible to prevent that in this moment. And if we cause harm along the way, we are ready for that accountability. Like, is that going to be discussed or established outside of a meeting like this for community?
I think that's a bigger question too than just community benefits. So I definitely want folks, other folks here to jump in. I would say this has absolutely come up at the community benefits discussion. There's been some conversation, particularly around like Metro, the Expo Center, for example, and ensuring that the ask of or the recommendation from the Community Benefits Advisory Group is really that they're following the IBR program follows the lead of Metro, and that part of it is acknowledging the previous harm and history of that site. Then additionally, there's been conversations about Vanport and then the ongoing displacement or the repeated displacement of the Black community, for example. Right. And then we go back to just the harm that's done to Indigenous communities with the taking of land. And so that comes up in ways that people are talking about how do we honor the culture and history. And I think it's one that doesn't show up so much, again, in the avoid further harm. Not that the conversation does it, but the more concrete benefits we're seeing kind of start to shape up to be in that more broad kind of community benefits category. And I would say, again, except for the one around the Expo Center in particular, because it came up as an early recommendation from CBAG. And so some of that language has already been added to that particular recommendation. And I see Ray's here too.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point, Shannon. And I think it's a great question, Nikki. And I guess reflecting on that and the question and Shannon's answer is, to me, it seems to be embedded in the program by the work this team has done and our equity group already. It's embedded in our program's equity approach. And so, Shannon just shared kind of some real life examples of how that's playing out in different parts of the program. I think the piece that we need to be mindful of is being vigilant and making sure that we are not missing those opportunities and that we are living our values.
And if I can add one more thing too, one that, as we've been talking a bit here, it makes me think about the one that we shared on this list around maintaining access for Native communities. And in particular, the conversation was really about, first of all, calling that group out specifically, just acknowledging that there's some cultural significance to being able to have access to the river and making sure that's not interrupted. But another really key piece was around going to those communities themselves and asking, what does access mean to them? What does that look like? And it not being defined necessarily by the program or others speaking for them, and really having that connection point. And just another piece I'll mention is that we are also in contact, and we run these benefits by our tribal liaison, and we also give updates to the different tribal communities that are affiliated with the program, so that we can make sure that they're plugged in and getting feedback. So that's just another touch point that we have to make sure that we're really addressing potential harm.
Awesome, thank you. And I hope you all understand, it's more of a question of like, I know we are acknowledging it by having this group, but acknowledging it for community publicly, because maybe community doesn't even know this group exists, right? Like, so they can say, oh, they took accountability before they did all of this, so that we can catch it beforehand rather than after the fact. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Absolutely. And briefly putting on my former community engagement for IBR hat, anytime there was a big public forum, the equity team is represented there. It's one of the stations. It's part of the conversation when there's public outreach with the community about the program. So I just wanted to uplift that for you too, Nikki.
All right. Now, do we have any people for public comment?
Not at this time.
Not at this time. Okay. All right. Well, then I'm going to take 1 minute more to just finish our conversation that we were having to close that out. So are there any other questions? Can you take the slides down just for a moment? Are there any other questions or comments for right now? While we have Shannon and Emily with us right now. Sabrina?
Just a process question. What is so it sounds like this work is going to come to us under each of the categories of the framework. What is the next one that's coming our way?
So the next one will be a mixture. There's a few of the avoid further harm category that the CBAG ran out of time on in their October meeting. So they will talk about this Thursday. And then there's a number of recommendations in mobility and accessibility category. And so what we've really done is front loaded any potential benefits that could land in the final environmental documents. And so you'll see kind of a mix of those categories when we come back to you all in November.
Great, thank you.
Okay. All right, and Shannon, will you be sending anything out after this meeting or no?
I think we're good because we got such great comments and feedback tonight. So just want to appreciate y'all. This was super helpful to our work, and it's just really important for us to make sure we have these touch points. So thanks for digging in.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. All right, so let's move to public comment. And thank you all for your participation. So we'll bring up the public comment slides. All right, so EAG comment instructions. Through Zoom, please use the link located in the meeting description on the YouTube meeting page or on the IBR EAG meeting webpage. Commentators will be allowed to turn on their webcams, but will not be allowed to share their screens and will be removed from the room once the public comment period concludes. By phone, dial 253-215-8782, meeting ID 986-0940-5983, passcode 701376. Dial *9 to raise your hand, dial *6 to unmute yourself. The facilitator will call on participants to provide comment. Please provide your name and affiliation. Commentators will be given 2 minutes to speak. Next slide. For comment instructions, please see interstatebridge.org/draft SEIS for the ways to submit official comment on the draft supplemental environmental impact statement. To submit comments after the meeting, fill out the comment form on the program website or email your comments to info@interstatebridge.org with EAG Public Comment in the subject line. Call 888-503-6735 and state EAG Public Comment in your message. All written comments must be received prior to 48 hours in advance of each upcoming meeting in order to be distributed to advisory group members. Comments received after that point will be distributed to members in advance of their next meeting. All right, next slide. Okay, so now we have 2 people in the waiting room. So please bring one in.
Chris Smith should be in the or be on now.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Chris Smith with the Just Crossing Alliance. Reminder, the Just Crossing Alliance is 36 environmental, transportation, land use, and environmental justice organizations seeking the most equitable. Can you hear me?
Yes, keep going, keep going.
Okay.
Yes, we were hearing you. You were saying
Yeah,
about the alliance.
And I'm hearing myself on a lag, so let me mute something here. So sorry, I'm hearing myself talk and it's making me crazy. So 36 organizations seeking the most sustainable and equitable outcomes possible from this project. Want to call out an equity issue that's evolving in a different forum, and that is the bi-state subcommittees of the transportation commissions that are considering tolling. Some of you from the Oregon side may remember that ODOT chartered a committee called EMAC to look at equitability in pricing as part of the Oregon toll efforts. That committee met for several years and produced a very strong recommendation to have a 50% low-income toll discount. That was carried into this process, but was somewhat dismayed to see that when the Joint Subcommittee forwarded toll scenarios to evaluate in the level 3 analysis that will be used to set tolling, they treated that discount 2 ways. The first is they have a scenario that says, we don't give the discount until the bridge opens. So for 6 years, there would be pre-completion tolling with no discount available to low-income households. The other scenario that they advanced was to implement that as soon as practical. And I think the practical problem is that Washington doesn't have a comparable policy. But that leaves open the possibility that we could start tolling without that discount. And we believe that the low-income discount must be available on the first day that tolling begins. We hope your group, with your focus on equity, will pay attention to that and make appropriate recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. All right, so we have one more person to provide public comment. Remember that when you're speaking, to turn your live stream off or down when speaking. I think that will help with not hearing yourself speaking to yourself.
And it looks like we lost the other caller. They yeah, are no longer on to leave a comment.
Okay. All right. Well, please give the poll for our meeting evaluation poll. And our next meeting is November 18th, 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. We always do 3 takeaways from our time together. So if you'll take the slide down, three takeaways from our time together. Who will give us a takeaway? Sabrina?
You know, I think there are things that we know and we say all the time about the importance of like collaboration and the interconnectedness of kind of our regional transportation system. And if you fix one thing over here, you need adjustments around the whole system. And I just think this is one of the conversations about the relationship between other parts of the region where there's congestion and how that impacts this project, and kind of the need for all of the parts of the puzzle to be pushing in the same direction, is really important, and kind of underscores the value and importance of us having so many partners at the table for this project.
Yeah. Two more. John.
I just appreciate, I turned off my camera most of the meeting and just listened to the presentation. So first, good presentations. A shout out to Nikki to carry some of the water and some of the other usual suspects. A lot of good information, a lot of good questions. It's sort of, some of these meetings are really informative, but there's a lot going on. So just appreciate folks kind of leaning in, and not everybody participates the same every meeting, but the consistency and the seeing the same face, it's really important. So good luck to you, Nikki. I can't wait to see your LAP plan, and I appreciate everybody for continuing to show up.
Yeah. One more. Well, I really appreciate how people dug in on the community benefits, and we had concerns about not getting enough time for that, and not getting enough feedback, and we got exactly what we needed. So thank you all for being so prepared and for doing your homework and for really like showing up. It was great. All right, friends. Also, thank you to our public comment. I really appreciate when people come. So good night. Take good care and enjoy Halloween, and Dia de los Muertos is coming. So enjoy.
Have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.